then their time order product is phi x phi y. If x naught is greater than y naught, and it is phi y phi x if y naught is greater than x naught. Okay. And then this time order product we have shown the other day that you can write this as a normal ordering plus contractions. Like this time order product is normal ordering plus contractions, and then this commutator which we have derived, we have shown that this is nothing but the Feynman propagators. Okay, and then we have also discussed why the importance of the normal ordering through the example of the hydrogen atom. Then I had some discussion about the implications of the vacuum energy and with cosmological problem. Now today what I am going to do is that going to introduce you to the Feynman diagrams. So first, though I have discussed that on the other day, but let me just tell you that this time order product of 4 fields, let us say phi x1, phi x2, phi x3, and phi x4, and this has been done in detail, and you can see as per the Weeks theorem, this time order product we can write as a normal order product plus all possible contractions. And we have shown you that when you take the vacuum expectation values of this time order product, then any term which is uncontracted will lead to 0, and the contracted term, these terms, if you contract, then as I mentioned earlier and defined that this contraction term will give you propagators. So this, if I contract these 4 fields, if I evaluate the time order product of these 4 fields, I get these operators, and these operators now I can graphically represent. You see, one particular, I have 4 points here, 4 points x1, x2, x3, x4 corresponding to the arguments, space-time arguments of these 4 fields, right? So this x actually contains both the time and the spatial coordinates. So this one will indicate this propagator df delta f x1 minus x2 is the particle is propagating from x1 to x2, and this one will say it is going x3 to x4. But since we have not introduced any interactions, these 2 lines is not talking to each other. Similarly, this term will indicate the propagation from x1 to x3, and the other one from x2 to x4. Similarly, this is x1 to x4 and x2 to x3. Now, these things, all these things we have discussed. Now today what I am going to do, I am going to discuss the introduce you to the Feynman diagrams. Here I have done some mathematical exercise where I have shown how the vacuum, when you introduce the interactions, then there are 2 places where there will be changes. One is that this interaction will change the field phi itself, and the other is the vacuum will change. So when we are writing 0 as a vacuum, this omega is the interacting vacuum. I'll come back to this, but today I don't want to bore you too much with the mathematics. Let us discuss some the origin of the Feynman diagrams first, how it comes into the picture. So let me recapitulate. What we have done, we have a free Lagrangian density for the real scalar field. This you have seen many times, and this was derived from the considerations of the Lorentz invariance. We have said that suppose we have a scalar field phi, and what is the free Lagrangian that we can construct from that out of this free field phi in terms of the phi and its derivatives. And we have argued that this is the Lagrangian which you can have, and this Lagrangian will give you an equation of motion which is linear. How you got the equation of motion? We had the action which we extremize by taking the functional derivatives and got this equation of motion, right? So this was the equation of motion, and this classical scalar field equation is nothing but the Klein-Gordon equations, which you derive probably in a different way by using quantum mechanics. Now this equation, this del mu, as I said, you have derivative with respect to space and time. So mu equal to 0 component is the temporal component, and mu equal to 1, 2, 3, those are spatial component. Now this derivative you can write in terms of temporal and the spatial component. So this you can write as the time double derivative in time and the double derivative in space plus m square phi equal to 0. All these things we have done, and then you can also calculate from there the conjugate momentum, like by taking the derivative of the Lagrangian with respect to phi dot, very similar to what you did in classical mechanics. P is del L del Q dot. Now, then we have what we have done, we have quantized, right? What we have done, as in the very first class I mentioned, that in classical mechanics we promote the classical dynamical variables to operators and use the quantization relation. X px is I h bar. Similarly, here in case of field, I have got the dynamical variable phi, the scalar field, and its conjugate momentum pi. So I have put the quantization conditions for the phi pi, and for the other quantization conditions are given here, right? They are 0. And please note that here in the two argument of phi and pi, I have kept the time argument same and the space argument different, right? This is called equal time commutation relation. And if I take equal time commutation relations, then we have shown you that the causality conditions, which was a problem in quantum mechanics, was restored. And then this from that quantization condition, we said we had got an analogous equation like Klein-Gordon equation, and from there we have derived, we have expressed this phi and pi like x and p in terms of the annihilation and creation operators. Right now, this is what we have got so far. Now, this let us check what is the dimension of this L. This is very important because I am going to introduce the interaction now, and then we should know what will be the kind of interactions that we can use here. So what I am going to do, I am first going to check the dimension of this L. Now you see, S, the action has no dimension, right? Because we have taken the peculiar unit that S, the action we are measuring in terms of h bar, right? The Planck constant, and then it is defined as L d4x. Now d4x has the dimension of length to the 4, and if x is dimensionless, then L has to have a dimension L to the -4. And you also know that in the natural unit, h bar equal to c equal to 1, you have this mass and length, they have the inverse dimension, right? Because MEV Fermi is equal to 1, so mass and length, they are inverse dimension. So if your L has dimension L to the -4, that means it has a dimension m to the 4, right? Because this is d4. Now, if L has a dimension m to the 4, then you see here this m square has dimension m square, mass square. So phi square should have a dimension mass square. So this has a dimension, phi has a dimension of mass, right? Phi has a dimension of mass. Hello? Is there any question? Something?
No, sir. You are audible.
Okay. So then this phi has a dimension. I am arguing that phi has a dimension of mass, right? So now the question is, what is the interactions we should put? We are working in 3 space and 1 time dimension, right? So because t and x, y, z, this is our space. Now in this Lagrangian, you can add a Lagrangian L by factorial 4. This factorial 4 has a meaning. It is just a constant factor which cancels nicely. We'll discuss that later. Lambda is the coupling constant, where this 4 pi to the 4 is the interaction term. Now question is, why I am taking phi to the 4? Can I take phi to the 5? No. Let me tell you why. So this dimensional analysis actually will guide us what kind of interaction term we can put in the theory. Knowing that this L has a dimension m to the 4, so I have taken phi has a dimension m to the 4, fine. Lambda, then the coupling constant doesn't have any dimension, right? Now suppose I take here a field which is phi to the 5. If I have a phi to the 5 here, then I will have a mass 5 dimension. If I have a mass 5 dimension, then this lambda should have a dimension mass to the -1, m inverse, so that my L again is m to the 4. Now, whenever this coupling constant will have a dimension, negative mass dimension,
that theory is not renormalizable in 4 dimension. So that is why any term in the theory which has a dimension more than pi 4 is not acceptable in 4 dimension, because that will give me a theory which is non-renormalizable. And in non-renormalizable theory, what happens if you do higher order calculations, those calculations diverges, and there will be difficulties in making those theory converging. So there will be diverging results. And actually, precisely in quantum electrodynamics, Feynman, Tomonaga, and Swinger, they showed how to renormalize the electromagnetic theory, and that was their novel meaning.
Professor Alam, please repeat that arguments of
dimension.
Yeah.
Sure. So what I am saying, you see, this S has the dimension of action, and we are making this. We are using the natural unit. That means we are measuring the S in the unit of h bar, which has a also dimension of action. So S is dimensionless because we are measuring all the you choose SI unit. You take 3 physical quantities: mass, you take length and time, and you decide mass I will measure in kilogram, I will measure in and what we have done here, we have taken 3 physical quantities here again, but that is action and velocity and mass. We decided that we measure it in the unit of h bar. H bar is Planck constant h by 2 pi. So h has a dimension of action. If I take h bar equal to 1, that means S doesn't have any dimension. And then velocity will measure unit of velocity of light in vacuum, c equal to 1. So our velocity will not have any dimension. So if I say our velocity is 1, that means it is moving with the velocity of light in vacuum. And if I say velocity is 0.5, that means it is moving half the velocity of light in vacuum. So since I am measuring action, in the unit of h bar equal to 1, S does not have any action. Similarly, in our discussions, all velocity will be dimensionless. Velocity will be dimensionless because I am measuring them in the unit of c equal to 1, right? So if I say velocity is 0.2, that means it is 20% of the velocity of light. But in your calculational procedure, there will be no problem, because if you took h bar equal to c equal to 1, you will be able to show that 197 MeV Fermi equal to 1. Just put the value of h bar as and c in SI unit, you will get this relation. Okay. So what I am saying, S is so d for x has the dimension of length to the 4. If c is 1, then time and space has the same dimension, because c velocity has the same dimension. Minus 4, length minus 4. And when length and mass, they are just, length into mass into mass.
No, that is, Professor Alam, that is okay, but why not n greater than 4?
Okay, I'm coming to that.
Yeah.
Okay. So this Lagrangian density is, I am taking, suppose I take phi to the 4. Phi to the 5, let me take. If I take phi to the 5, then if I want to have this L dimension m to the 4, then lambda should have a dimension m to the minus 1, right? And whenever the coupling constant will have any dimension, that theory will not be renormalizable. This is the guiding factor to write down the, interaction for Lagrangian. Now, you can say, how do we know that? Okay. If I do higher order calculations, I will be able to show you explicitly that yes, if lambda has a mass dimension, negative mass dimension, then that theory, higher order calculations using that theory will diverge. But here, let me give you an argument. So if lambda has a mass dimension, right? Then suppose I calculate the cross sections. I'll come a little later about the cross sections. Suppose I calculate the cross sections. Suppose you consider about the Compton scattering, and Compton scattering means it is photon electron scattering, right? Now there the coupling constant is electric charge E. Right? A photon couples with the electron with the coupling constant E, electric charge. So if when the photon, when I draw the Feynman diagram, you will see the photon and electron, they will have two vertices. So amplitude will be proportional to E square, and cross section is the square of the amplitude, scattering amplitude. So then your cross section will have a dimension which is e to the 4, right? So what happens? The coupling constant appears in the cross section with certain dimension. Now if your coupling constant has a negative dimension, then to compensate that, something will come in the numerator with positive dimension, and then when you take the limit, that will diverge. So I'll come back to this, okay? But this is a very strong guideline that your coupling constant either should have no dimension or it should have positive dimension, not negative dimension. So phi 3, if you take, that theory is fine, it is renormalizable, right? But anything above 4 will make that theory non-renormalizable. I'll come back to this again, okay?
Okay.
Now so in 4D, phi 4 is okay, phi cube is okay. If it is phi cube, then this has a dimension m cube. So lambda has a dimension m to make L dimension m to the 4. That is fine. But whenever you have lambda dimension negative mass dimension, that will create a problem. We'll see that. Okay, we'll see it in a moment. Now let me just go to the let me introduce the interactions, and this will make things clear. So we have taken the total interaction Hamiltonian is unperturbed part H0 plus the interaction part, and this is the Hamiltonian density. So total Hamiltonian will be d4x times the total Hamiltonian density. And so these are the things which we have already discussed, and we have discussed 3 pictures of the quantum mechanics, Schrodinger picture, Heisenberg and Dirac picture, and we said that doing calculation in interaction or Dirac picture in quantum theory is very convenient. And that picture, a state evolves from time t0, it evolves to time t by a operator u, and that u you have seen satisfies the equation. This equation we have derived. This equation we have derived, that this u satisfies a equation like this, and this u we have solved earlier, and that u in the limit of t0 tends to minus infinity, that means when the particle is coming from remote past and hitting the detector, interacting and then getting detected at far future, then this u, this operator u in this limit becomes the scattering matrix. So this is we have all discussed. So this is the scattering matrix in the limit t tends to t0, lower limit minus infinity to plus infinity, and this equation sometimes it is called Dyson equation. Okay. Once you know this S, then this is the, as I said, this is the scattering matrix. Now these are all the things which I have discussed earlier. So this is a repetition, but I am repeating to you because I am going to introduce Feynman diagrams. Now this S evolved, suppose you have initial state, this S will evolve the state to Si, right? And then suppose in the detector, due to the interaction, it will take to, because in S there are interactions. Because of this interaction, this S will take this state I to Si. And suppose in the final, in the detector you are searching for a state F, then this matrix element SIF will give you the scattering amplitude. So this FSI, that is what we are going to calculate. Now, one interesting thing is that when the particles are coming, there is every probability that they will miss each other. They will not interact. So in this S, there must be a term 1. And this is really there. If you take n equal to 0 term, that is 1. That term is not interesting because, there is no interaction. You will not learn anything. So sometimes what is done actually, this matrix element is taken with S minus 1, and then that state is taken, that matrix element is taken between the final state I and the initial state I and final state F, because from 1 you will not learn anything. Now let me take a very simple example. You have a complex scalar field denoted by capital phi and phi star. Please, today I am now introducing new things. Capital phi and phi star, they are complex field and they are interacting with the phi. Okay. So now the total Lagrangian for such field will be, see, del mu phi star del mu phi m square, capital M square phi phi star. This is the free Lagrangian for the capital phi complex field, plus a real field phi. As I said, this is the kinetic energy term for the real field, half del mu phi minus m square by 2 phi square. This is the real field. And now there is an interaction between this capital phi field and the small phi field. Phi star phi into phi, and coupling constant is g. So this phi field and phi star field, they are interacting with the phi field with a coupling g. And please note the dimension of this term. This phi has a dimension m mass. This has a dimension mass. This has a dimension mass. So there is a dimension m cube. So, but L has to have dimension as I 4. So G has a dimension m, positive mass dimension. So this theory is renormalizable. There is no problem. If you take here let us say phi square, still it will do, because then you will have a dimension m4, G will be dimensionless. But if you take phi cube, gone, because that will have a dimension m5, so G will have a dimension of negative mass dimension, and that theory will not be renormalizable. Okay, so this is the interaction we are taking, that complex field capital phi is interacting with small phi, right? And you know this, I have written down the expansion for this field. Okay, this phi I can write as d cube p by 2 pi cube by 1 to ep. Ap is the annihilation operator, and bp dagger is the creation operator. Phi star will be just complex conjugate of that. Okay, so ap will be annihilation or creation operator, bp will be the creation operator. Suppose, and whenever you have a complex field, you will have a particle and its corresponding antiparticle. So this phi field will annihilate an antiparticle, annihilate a particle, and bp dagger will be creating an antiparticle. Ap dagger will create a particle, and bp will annihilate the antiparticle. So though this is scalar, this is not fermion. So I should not apply this to electron positron because they are fermions. But for the sake of argument, just let me tell you, A will destroy an electron, bp dagger will create a positron. Ap dagger will create an electron, and bp will destroy a positron, right? This we'll see when we discuss fermions. This is how. So A will annihilate or destroy particle, bp dagger will create antiparticle, and ap dagger will create particle, bp will destroy antiparticle. Because since these are complex field, so it will have distinct particle and antiparticle. This you have seen. When I have calculated for complex scalar field, the total charge, you have seen there that particle contribution from particle and antiparticle, adds in the total charge with a relative negative sign. Okay, so but in scalar field, this phi is a real field, it is its own antiparticle. So there is no distinction. And this EP, you know, the energy of this capital phi should be P square plus capital M square, because in the Lagrangian I have taken capital M, and this phi energy Ek will be K square plus M square, because this, for the small phi field I have taken a small m mass. Okay. Now, you know, we have also calculated the Feynman propagator delta F, which is given by I by P square in momentum space, I by P square minus M square plus I epsilon. We have done it. And for the propagator, Feynman propagator for the phi field, small phi, I by P square minus M square plus I epsilon, where mass is small. Just same form, but mass should be different, because the phi, capital phi, and this phi has a different mass. And this is what I said is distinctly written here. The AP will kill a phi, and AP dagger will create a phi. BP dagger will kill a phi bar, I mean antiparticle of phi, and BP dagger will create an antiparticle. And AK will kill a phi, and AK dagger will create a phi. Okay. So now the interaction Hamiltonian you have got is this G phi star phi, because if you know, if you know the Lagrangian comes with a negative sign, then the Hamiltonian will come with a positive sign, right? With a positive sign, because of this relation. Now, you know, you got this H. You got this H, the Hamiltonian. So that Hamiltonian, let us go and put in this scattering matrices, because I want to study the scattering because of that interaction. So I'll put it here, right? And this has many infinite order of terms, right? I can start from n equal to 1, 2, and see what we are getting. So this H we will put in that expression. Okay, this is the expression where I'll put this F. Now, let us take the term S equal to 1. When you take S equal to 1, from there you will have d4x1 time order product of this Hamiltonian Hi, which I just wrote like this here. So here you have d4x phi star small phi. So suppose we denote this small phi by dotted line, and capital phi and phi dagger by solid line. I will come to this. Then this will be looking like, this will be the Feynman diagram. A phi, small phi is dot, and phi star is solid line. So this is the Feynman diagram corresponding to this term. And please note, when I am saying phi is denoted by solid line and phi star is also solid line, I can do that. And phi star is dotted line. If you draw a diagram with 2 dotted line and 1 solid line, you will be wrong. You will be wrong because there is, I have decided that phi will be dotted line. So if I am writing here 2 dotted line, then I am wrong because I don't have 2 phi, small phi here. So that will be wrong. So this interaction term will guide you to how to write the Feynman diagram. This is called a vertex actually. So you know, so this is a problem. You know, sorry, this is not a problem. I mean, this you should always remember that once I decide this will be my notation, right? I can, if I draw a 2 dotted line, that is not allowed because then I need 2 phi here. I don't have. So this is the correct diagram. Now the more interesting term is second order term. In the second order term, if you pick up from here, you will see there will be 2 Hi. And you note that please that this Hi at x1 and x2. So second order term will be just this. Time order product of G phi star small phi. This is the H1 at x1 and this is the H at x2, right? And now you have a time order product here. Now, as I said, as time order product T is normal order product, right? Right? From, because when as I said, when I contract to operator, that gives me a propagator, right? And what is propagator? I have defined that it tells you, gives you the amplitude for the particle which goes from x1 to x2 or x2 to x1. So see, I have taken out a term from a second order term from your matrix. And then propagator saying that it is propagating from x1 and x2. Right. Now you never should contract capital phi with small phi, because that will not give you anything. That is not a propagator. I mean, when you contract, it has to be the same field, right? Because that is what because this, you know, this as I said while discussing the propagator, we have said that when you take the vacuum expectation value of phi x, phi y, then it create the particle at phi y and kill it at x. So it has to be the same particle. So this same particle, so that means the field should be the same. So I have contracted this. Then if I contract that, I get the Feynman diagram. This is normal product of phi phi star, Feynman diagram, and phi phi star. So what is it saying? It is telling me that two particles corresponding to capital phi and phi star at x1, right? So two particles corresponding to phi and phi bar at x1, right, interacting with this phi, small phi at x1, and that particle is propagating to x2 and again giving me two particle phi and phi star. So this is like a scattering of phi dagger to phi bar to phi bar with an intermediate particle of small phi, which is denoted by this propagator. Why? You see, let us try to understand that. What is we mean by scattering? So let us say two particle to two particle scattering. So two particle comes, interacted at the point x1, right? And that due to that interactions here, right, at x1, this propagator goes up from x1 to x2, and then again two particle created there. And this is happening because you see, if you see, then this is the kind of vertex this interaction will allow you. You may ask me, why should I need that? I will just have phi dagger, and from there itself I will draw through line here, right? That is not allowed, because your basic vertex told you that you have three particle vertex, two capital phi, one small phi, right? So I have to have three particle vertex. So two particle comes, interacts at this x1 vertex, right? So this is a complete complete vertex, and from there these small phi particles propagate and again produce this. So it could be something like this. I mean, like electron and positron, they annihilate, produce a photon, and that photon again produce the electron positron pair. So E plus E minus going to E plus E minus. That is what is called Bhabha scattering. We'll come to that. This is very important, that you see this phi field, the expansion what I have shown you, it has annihilation. It can annihilate a particle and create an antiparticle, right? So if I put here the argument x1, then at x1 a phi is annihilated, right? And then another phi bar can also be annihilated there, because you have another BP operator, annihilation operator, which is from where you can get another phi bar which will get annihilated here at x1, right? And then so phi star, this is telling you that phi and phi bar will get annihilated there, and then this propagator is telling you that from x1 the phi particle will be, so the two will interact and give you a small phi. The two will interact and give you a small phi, and that small phi will propagate from x1 to x2, and then again produce particle phi and phi bar. So this is the diagrammatic representations, one of the diagrammatic representations of this term. Okay, now you can say, okay, I can contract also not the small phi, I'll contract this phi star and this phi. That is also possible. then what will happen in this diagram? You will have a dotted line, which is small phi, solid line, and then I have contracted capital phi, which is a solid line. Then it will be dotted, solid, goes to solid, and dotted, solid. I'll come back to this again. Don't worry. So here, when you draw the Feynman diagrams, you don't need to know all this mathematics. You don't need actually. Once you, but you should know to tell you here, okay, that from this second order terms in the in the scattering matrix, time order product give me the normal ordering and possible contraction, and that possible contraction gave me a propagator which is propagating from x1 to x2, and these are the other two fields which are giving me all the possibility of creation or annihilation of particle at x1. It will take it to x2, and again some particle-antiparticle pair will be created. So this is one of the possible process. I'll now come to construct the Feynman rules. Now, if you know the basics, it is fine. Now, when you will get habituated to this kind of accustomed to this kind of calculations, you don't need all these things which I have discussed. Those are just I have explained how it originates. But suppose now I tell you, just at looking at the Feynman diagram, Lagrangian, how can I draw the diagrams? So this is the original Lagrangian which I have taken. Complex scalar field. This is the free part, and this is the for the complex part, and this is the free part for the real part. And this is the interaction between the complex phi and the real phi. Now I decide that this is up to you. Just what is the notation I will use? Suppose a particle incoming, phi particle is coming. I'll denote that by solid line, and correspondingly I'll use a number 1. Right? Why should I use number 1? I'll explain to you. Because you see, because where is that? Let me. Because you see, when I have expanded this field in terms of annihilation and creation operator, they are the these operators which are responsible for creation or annihilation of the operators. They don't have any coefficients here. It is just AP. So unit coefficient is always unity. Right? Here it is 1. Here it is 1. Here it is 1. Right? And this is anyway. This has come because of the Fourier transform. Nothing else. So the coefficient for any creation and annihilation operator for scalar field is always 1. So for incoming and outgoing particle corresponding to any scalar field, you have to associate a factor 1. Now let me just give you what can make a difference. When we will discuss the electromagnetic theory, you will know that this psi and psi bar, when we will expand, this AP dagger, they will have a coefficients of Dirac-Spinor, UP, U bar P, VP, VP bar. So there, when you draw the Feynman diagrams, in case of 1, you have to put appropriately U bar P, V bar P. But in scalar field, that coefficient is always 1. So any incoming, so when you draw the Feynman diagram, for scalar particles, for any incoming and outgoing particle, you associate a number 1 to the Feynman diagrams. Okay, this is number 1. And we have decided that capital phi will be denoted by solid and the small phi by dotted lines, right? You can just take opposite also. Internal line of a Feynman diagram is always denoted by the propagator. And the propagator we have derived, it is I by P square minus capital M square phi. Capital phi. Any question? So can I proceed?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Nawaz Sharif, you please mute yourself.
So you see, So this is the Lagrangian. Now I am developing the Feynman diagram, and you can do it without going to the details which I have discussed. This is incoming. Suppose any scattering process, there will be some incoming particle and outgoing particle. For any incoming scalar particle, always 1. For any internal line, I should associate I by p square minus m square if m is the mass, right? Capital Phi, and if the mass is small m square, then this. How to calculate the vertex? The ingredients for any Feynman diagrams are 3 quantities. One is external lines. By external line, we mean the particle which are incoming or outgoing. Right? Those are external lines. And then internal lines. We have derived the expression for that. And for the vertex, we have not derived. But let us see how to do it. Very simple way I will tell you, but just by looking at the diagram, you will be able to do it. Okay. Now, and this is the notation we will use for incoming and outgoing particle. For the external line, for internal line, we will be using this as propagator. And for vertex, how to calculate vertex, I will tell you very simple relations. Whenever you have a interaction Lagrangian interactions, like here it is, this is the interaction. Let me call it Li. So this is the interaction Lagrangian. I will multiply this by I, right? So if I multiply this by I get minus Ig phi phi star phi, right? So this is what I get. Then to get the vertex, what I'll do, I'll just delete all the field. This is I have done deliberately. It is not, it is intentional. And whatever will be leaving, will be left out, that is the vertex, right? So here, the 2 capital Phi field, solid line as I said, and a dotted line. This is the notation for the vertex. Solid and magnitude put the magnitude 1 for scalar field. For the internal line, you will be putting a quantity I by p square minus m square. This is the quantity that you will put for vertex. This is the procedure, simplest procedure to calculate it. You multiply the interaction Lagrangian by I and delete all the field. Whatever will be there, left out, that will be the quantity which will represent the vertex. And here one scalar field, real scalar field small phi, meets the 2 fields of capital Phi. So this is the notation for the vertex, and its magnitude is minus Ig, because that is how I got it. So this is all the ingredients. So let me repeat. This is very important, that now you should be feeling confident that within a Lagrangian I should be able to diagnose. How? Because the free part will give you the propagator. This free part of the Lagrangian always gives you the propagator. That is the internal line. We have got it, right? And then external line you got, as I explained, from the expansion in terms of annihilation and creation operators, the magnitude of the external lines. And for the vertex, you take the Lagrangian, multiply by I, and delete all the fields. Whatever will remaining, that will be minus Ig. In case if you write down the Lagrangian for the electrodynamics, you will see the vertex will be IE gamma mu. Gamma is Dirac matrix, but E will come, that electric charge. That is the strength of the vertex. Okay. Now, so this particular quantity, right? Now what I do, I want to calculate. I want to calculate a vertex. Okay. Let us see how can I do it. The S matrix, as I said, is I can always write as S equal to 1 plus IT. Why this one? This one is, as I said, the particle and the 2 particles, when they are approaching each other, there is a possibility they will not interact, so that will give you nothing, 1. And this IT will contain all the other term. Now what happens, in this, whenever some process will take place, some reaction will take place, the energy and momentum will be always conserved. Unless their energy momentum is conserved, that reaction will not take place. So in all this process, you have to associate a energy momentum conservation. Now, so suppose this P matrix is representing some reaction, then it will of course conserve energy and momentum. So when you write S, you take the matrix element between two state S matrix, you take the matrix element between the state I and F, initial and final state, right? This will give you Fi. So unless F is equal to I, this will become 0, right? F equal to I will give 1, that will become 1, right? Means 1 plus 2 plus many particles going to many particles, then addition of all the 4 momentum of this must be equal to the addition of all the 4 momentum in this side. So I can represent by a Dirac delta function, 4-dimensional Dirac delta function, because you have 3, these are all 4 momenta. So there are 3, 1 energy conservation and 4 momentum conservation. So so this delta function is telling me that all the energy momentum should be conserved, and this is the matrix element which you have got. Now how can I so if I know this if I know this M, then I can calculate the cross sections, right? I can calculate the cross section. Let me show you. So suppose you have a diagram where capital phi and capital phi, a capital phi and phi bar particle, let us say I mean the particle and antiparticle corresponding to those two complex phi field is interacting, is having a scattering, right? From suppose you call a particle 1 plus 2 going to 1 prime plus 2 prime, right? And then the Feynman diagram for such particle in the leading order must be this. Why I am saying this? Because as I said, these two particle phi, capital phi and phi bar will interact and produce a small phi particle, this relay particle. Because you see, the structure of the vertex is 2 solid, 1 dot. Why? Because this phi particle we are denoted by solid, so 2 solid, and this phi we are small phi we are denoting by dotted line. So any vertex will have a structure like 2 solid, in this particular case 1 dot, right? So here 2 solid, 1 dot, they are interacting, and as I said, this particle propagates from this, as I said in this in the Feynman diagram in the coordinate space, it takes the particle from x1 to x2, so it will not be a contact interaction. The two particles will not be they will interact, and the particle will not be produced at this point itself. It will propagate, phi will propagate, and again it will produce the particle phi and phi bar. I'll give a concrete example here. Now, what is the magnitude of this diagram? You see, as I said, this is an incoming particle, this is an incoming particle, they are external line, and I told you that for them you just put 1. So this M amplitude I am calculating. IM. Why IM? Because I have defined like this, IM. And how it is coming, the S matrix which I have defined, as I said, it will be this. I have been repeatedly telling that this only thing is that factor Dirac delta function, which is nothing but this is implementing the energy momentum conservation, because without energy momentum conservation no reaction will take place. So 1 plus 2 going to 1 prime to 2 prime. Correspondingly, the momentum of this is P1 plus P2, P1 momentum, P2 momentum, they'll interact and give you P1 prime, P2 prime. Now 2 phi will meet, give me a small phi, that will propagate from this point to that point and again produce capital phi and capital phi bar. And this is nothing but F. And Feynman diagrams, this is the correct Feynman diagrams. Now, corresponding to this external line, I put a 1. For this external line, I put another 1. Then I have the vertex. And the magnitude of the vertex is, as I said, is minus I. You see, that is how we got. I multiplied this by I and deleted the field. I minus ig was leaving it out. So minus ig. Then I got minus ig. Now the particle is propagating, and for the propagating particle or internal line, this is internal line. You know, so for the internal line, propagator magnitude I by p square minus m square, which I derived also. See, I by p square minus m square. So I by p square minus m square. Now, so 1 minus ig, then the propagator, then I meet another vertex. So another minus ig, and then again 1. So this is my value of this amplitude Im. If you do it, you get minus g square by p square minus m square. Now this is the m you got, right? This is the m you got. Now what I do with this m, I'll be able to calculate the cross sections. I'll be able to compare with experiment. I can, certain cases, I can predict the production of some new particles by predicting some cross sections in this way. Now let me see how this is useful. So please see that I have drawn the Feynman diagrams and told you what is the value of the diagram. 1. This is the value of the application. I want to calculate the cross section. So this is the definition of the cross section. You know, suppose, so what happens? 2 phi and phi bar particle are coming, interacting here and producing particles. And you have 2 detectors to detect those particles. You can any detector. Now, the question here one asks is that d and dt, and in the detector you are going on connecting the and this detector is placed in an angular coordinate theta and phi. Then you, what is the rate of detecting this particle d and dt, number of particle detected per unit time at this theta phi, right? Number of particle detected per unit time at the angular coordinate theta phi, that must be proportional to the incident flux, right? Consider the case where 0 flux, no particle you will be getting there because there is nothing to collide. If you have many particles here, right, then if the incident flux is very large, by flux you mean number of particles coming per unit area per unit time. So if flux is very large, there will be a lot of interactions, and as a consequence they will interact and give you more number of particles per unit time in your detector theta phi. So the number of particles you detect in the detector will be proportional to the initial flux. What is the incident flux with which particle are coming? So this is just a common sense that, you know, this number of particle you detect here will be proportional to the incident flux. And you know, this constant of proportionality is nothing but cross section. That's all. This constant of proportion. So it is a very simple definition that in the 2 particles are interacting, and because of the interactions, some particles are produced. They are getting detected in the detector. Now you count what is the number of particles per unit time it is detected, and that must be proportional to the incident flux, right? And then the constant of proportionality is nothing but the cross section. Okay, d sigma d omega, and that is all you will be able to calculate by this. And you know, this cross section formula I'll derive tomorrow. This, you know, derivation is little mathematical. I don't know. Please don't get bored because this is very important. Unless I do that, then you will not get the, you know, full flavor of the, you know, Feynman diagrams and its importance. So the differential cross section in center of mass frame d sigma d omega, that is what I said. It can be written as, you know, this factor within the curly bracket times MIF square. This is MIF, the amplitude or matrix element square. You know, that matrix element we have calculated by using the Feynman diagram. See, so if I square it, and put it there, then I will get the cross sections, right? So and this factor which in this curly bracket is coming from the phase space, and that is the example other day I was giving you. Any physical process, right? For any physical process to take place, two things has to be satisfied. One is that dynamics should allow that, and that dynamics is, contained in this matrix element, or which comes from the Feynman diagram, right? Because that contains the interaction, because all this interaction vertex, through the interaction vertex, this MIF contains the information about the interaction, so it, or the dynamics. So dynamics of this any process will come there. And this part, within the curly bracket, what you see here, that is actually is nothing but the phase space or kinematics factor. So any physical process contains two things. One is the dynamics, other is the kinematics. So dynamics will come from Feynman diagram, and kinematics is just a phase space indication. It's for two particle to two particle, it is easy to show this, and I will show you. Okay. So this is where the Feynman diagram comes, right? So you can, within this curly bracket, this phase space factor you have to calculate. So MIF you have calculated for this particular diagram. What is that? This diagram, because I told you how to do it, because it is 1 1 minus Ig propagator 1 1 etc etc. So you know this value, and we have actually for so long we have spent so much time to show you why this is 1 and why this propagator is I by p square minus m square, and also today I showed you why this vertex is minus Ig. So we all everything we know now. Now we have to draw some more Feynman diagrams and get accustomed with it. So that is no problem at this moment to learn the drawing. I'll elaborate more tomorrow onwards on this. So this is the formula for the cross section, and as I said, this MIF comes from the dynamics. Now, and this is the phase space. This is a famous example, as I was telling you. So if you drive a car, then there are two things that should happen. Suppose you are driving a car and gone to a market and you want to park it somewhere. So two things must happen for you to successfully do that. One is that you should know how to drive. Your interactions with the steering of the car, that is the dynamics within this Feynman diagram, within this matrix element, that contains the dynamics, your interaction with the steering, right? And that comes in here from the Feynman diagrams. And then in the parking lot there must be space, so that you should be able to park your car. And this curly bracket thing is actually availability of the space. So if you have available space, if you know how to interact with the steering, then you get a cross sections. So this phase space factor we'll discuss tomorrow. I think we'll discuss tomorrow, but I'll elaborate some more on Feynman diagrams, which is more important. Today I have just introduced you to that, and just try to give you a feeling that how it is useful. So right. So this is the amplitude, as I have been repeatedly saying. So square is G4 by p square minus m square, and this p square is the this is the propagator. This propagator, this is coming from the from the propagator, from the internal line, and in the internal line the momentum must be p. This is the momentum p, but this should be p1 plus p2, because momentum has to be conserved at each vertex. So when you draw a Feynman diagrams like this, energy momentum has to be conserved. So p1 plus p2 must be equal to p, and then this p must be equal to p1 prime plus p2 prime. Okay, so this p then, because with which incident momentum the particles are colliding. So this p right? Mass of the particle and if you don't know the mass of the particle, but if you measure some cross sections and get some peak somewhere, then that will give you the clue for the discovery of the new particles. Okay, so now so the d sigma d omega, something which is within the curly bracket, which is coming from the phase space, the kinematics, and this is the dynamics coming from the Feynman diagrams. So d sigma omega is this phase space times the quantity which is coming from the Feynman diagram, and the entire this thing, right? And you can diagrammatically you can write this d sigma d omega, the cross section is given by this phase space times this, which is this modular square of the Feynman diagram. Actually, this is the MIF square, which is denoted like this. So this is how you can go on drawing the Feynman diagrams. Okay. Now this expression one needs to derive. Now let me give you some more clue to what are the process that can be there in a Feynman diagram. So board would have very useful for me because there are a lot of possibilities which I cannot show you here. What I can do here, when I have discussed this S2, right? And I have said that I have contracted this small phi field, so that is giving me the propagator, right? I can also so something which is I am contracting this small phi field, that will be in the internal line. So when they will be in the internal line, this particular contraction will not any small phi particle in the external line, because we have contracted and they are the propagator and they should always appear in the internal line. But I could have also contracted this phi star with this phi. Then then I would have got the propagator for the capital phi, and then this small phi will come in the external line. So I am saying as many contraction possibilities, I have as many possibilities. Those details we do when we discuss the electromagnetic theory, because it will come out very nicely. Okay, so for this kind, so the moral of this story is that given any Lagrangian, you just look at the Lagrangian and see what is the free part. So here this is the free part, and in the free part will give me the propagator, because p square minus this m square is the propagator, and then this is the free part for this small phi field. So this will give me another propagator, and this will give me the interactions. And this that I can get for the external lines. External lines are incoming and outgoing particles. So there are many other procedures which I will processes which I will discuss. And this is the final formula for the cross sections. And as I said, this comes from the Feynman diagrams, and we'll draw some more Feynman diagrams. Before that, what one needs to do actually, one needs to derive this formula. Now, should I start that derivation today, or if you have some question, it will be better to discuss that, because otherwise I can do something, but maybe tomorrow I can start this long derivation. It will be nice if you ask some questions and we can have some discussion.
Okay, if any questions, please ask.
So I have a question, Professor Alam.
Please.
Yeah. During writing the Lagrangian for the dimension n of the scalar field, that which is forbidden for n greater than equal to 4, right?
Right.
Yeah. So is that any effect on the higher dimensional scalar field theories on that?
Right.
On that conclusion.
So yes. So if you where is that? Where is my presentation gone? Can you see my presentation?
No.
No.
It was not visible.
Oh, really?
I think you. Yeah.
So just 1 minute.
Yeah. No problem.
Window. Oh, probably it is got closed somehow. Just 1 minute. I have time to discuss. Don't worry. Let me see this font somewhere. So
Yes.
Yes, yes. It's visible. Yeah.
so now what will happen? You see, first of all, this Lagrangian should have a dimension m to the 4, mass 4 dimension,
That's
right?
no problem.
Otherwise, right? Because otherwise my S is dimensionless. Now if I write here phi 4, then this is, as I argued, phi has also a mass 4 dimension, and will be dimensionless. Fine.
No problem.
If I have phi to the 5, or let us say phi to the 6, phi to the 5 is bad because this is not invariant under phi changing to minus pi. So phi to this, let us say phi to the 5, nothing wrong. Okay. So phi to the 5. If I have phi to the 5 here, then this coupling should have a dimension of negative mass dimension, m to the
Minus 1.
negative mass dimension. Now in the cross section, to cancel that 1 by m dimension, right? 1 by mass dimension, a momentum scale will come in the numerator, because this lambda, if it has a mass dimension 1 by m, 1 by mass, to cancel that 1 by mass dimension in the numerator, a momentum scale will come, because momentum has a dimension mass again. And when you take the momentum infinity, that term will diverge.
Acha. Okay.
Now you may ask, why should I take the momentum tends to infinity? Now you have to take that momentum tends to infinity, because if you take a finite momentum, suppose you are doing investigations and you take a finite momentum from not 0 to infinity, 0 to some finite value, then what can happen actually? You can go to another Lorentz frame where you will have some momentum scale not set, but from momentum is not a Lorentz invariant quantity. So
Yes.
go to another frame, your upper limit will again change.
Okay. Okay.
Right? So
Yeah.
your then will not be Lorentz invariant. If you take a negative mass dimension, then that momentum scale will come in the numerator with a mass dimension, and when you take that limit infinity, then it will encounter a divergence. On the other hand, suppose you take this phi cube, then this lambda will have a
Mass dimension.
positive mass dimension. Then that momentum scale will come denominator. That will not be any divergence.
Okay. Okay.
But detailed calculations one can do, the denomination calculations. I'll show you for this phi-4 theory. I'll show you how the divergence comes.
Oh, okay.
So these are nice guidelines to write down the interactions, that your coupling dimension of your coupling constant should never be negative. When your theory is non-renormalizable, that will mean that for entire order calculation will diverge. And that was a big problem actually in up to 1950s. That problem was solved by Tomonaga, Swinger, and Feynman. Okay.
Okay. Okay.
Any other question?
If any question from the audience, you can ask now.
Hello. I have some questions.
Please.
Yes, I was having a lot of disturbance. I was getting a lot of disturbance from your side today, so I missed 3 parts. I would like to ask those again. Can you explain me the term I to F, the interaction term? That.
Okay. Sure.
That's my first question. And second question is,
yeah, please.
we considered the coefficients of the operators 1 in case of scalar fields, and you said something when the coefficients are not 1. If you could repeat that portion.
I'll tell you both. But yes, but there is some disturbance today. Yes, you are right. I don't know from where, from my side. No, I guess. Anyway, so let me tell you. The both the things. You know, this for external lines, the external lines, external lines corresponds to the incoming or outgoing particle. That means incoming means the particle which are getting annihilated, outgoing means what are getting created, right?
Yes.
Now, you see, when we expanded this phi field, right? This is the expression, and you see the coefficients of this, coefficients of this annihilation and creation operators are 1. This
Yes.
e to the x you don't count, please, because this is coming from the Fourier transform. So 1. Now what I am saying, when you will be doing the electrodynamics, let us say when you do this for the Dirac field, Dirac equations are the solution U and V, right?
Yes, I again lost you. Can you Dirac? I lost you at Dirac.
So when you solve the Dirac equations, then the solutions are not e to the ip dot x. It will be up e to the ip dot x or vp to the ip dot x, etc. That spinors u and v.
Okay.
So they will appear as a coefficients of this annihilation and creation operators. So when you draw the diagrams for the electrons, then the external lines will not be unity. It will be either spinor values u, v, or u bar, v bar. Okay.
Okay.
Now, if you do the same thing for the Maxwell field, the Maxwell field, the vector potentials, right? Maxwell field.
Yeah.
Then again you will see the coefficients of the annihilation and creation operator will not be unity. You will have polarization vectors.
Okay.
Right? So those polarization vectors you have to put. Now you are saying about this S matrix, right?
Yes.
Now this S matrix I can write always as 1 plus IT, and this S dagger is 1, that is the unitarity of S. From there, what you can get the famous optical theorem. I am not going into that detail, but you can just see here. You can also calculate S dagger, like that will be 1 minus IT dagger, and put SS dagger equal to 1. From there you will get the optical theorem, which you have studied in quantum mechanics, and you will get the field theoretic option here. Okay. Now what I am saying there is that this one term is not very interesting, because this is indicating representing the fact that two particles, they just don't see each other. There is a possibility that they just miss each other. So that is one. No interaction is taking place. Now IT, some physical process will start taking place from this term. Now any physical process which will take place, energy and momentum for such process has to be valid.
Yes.
Now that energy momentum, suppose you have two particles going to two particles. So say P1 momentum is P1, P2 for the incident two particles, and 1 prime and P1 prime and P2 prime for the final particles. Then P1 plus P2 must be equal to P1 prime plus P2 prime.
Yes.
Similarly, U1 plus E2 must be equal to U1 prime plus E2 prime.
Yes.
So from this T, I can always factor out that energy momentum conservation, which is implemented by this delta function. Because you see, this is P1 plus P2 equal to P1 prime plus P2 prime.
Yes.
And whatever is left out in T, after you factor out this Dirac delta function, is this matrix element M I to F. And this part actually you are calculating from the Feynman diagram. As I said, for this Feynman diagram, two scalar particles scattering and giving you two scalar particles. So external line you put 1, 1.
Yes, this part I understood.
Minus this, so you get the M. When you get the M, there is a formula for the cross section. You put it there, and that is what the cross section you theoretically calculate and compare with the experiment. and or you know, if you have some unknown particles, you can predict also cross section for the production of such particles, and experimentalists can measure and check. Is that okay?
Yes, and I have one last question. In the scattering matrix where we were showing the small phi got contracted, there if you could show me that formula, I have one question in that.
Please, I'm coming. Sure, but this is, as I said, this is one possibility.
Yes.
So when you contract this small phi, that gives you the propagator, and I said they will always appear in the internal line.
Yes.
Now when you contract this, make this kind of contraction, then this will not give you any process where small phi comes an external line.
Yes.
Now, but that possibility, having small phi in the external line, that possibility is there. What you do, don't contract small phi, you contract this phi star and phi. Then then you will get a propagator phi, this capital phi, and then in that case small phi can come in the external line.
Yes. I have just one question. This after the propagator del f x1 minus x2, you've written phi star x2. What is this term signifying?
Sorry.
After the propagator, here in the scattering matrix S2, after the propagator, Feynman propagator,
Right.
first is normal ordering, then is Feynman propagator, and then there is phi star x2. What is that term signifying?
So it is saying that see, this phi star is phi can have this phi can create a antiparticle or annihilate a particle. Phi star can create a particle and annihilate an antiparticle, right? So that is happening at x1. Then from there, this small phi particle is going to x2 and producing particles at point x2. So if something is annihilated at x1, right? Say phi bar is annihilated at x1, right? At x2, phi bar will be produced.
Okay, I got it.
This I will elaborate more. Just I gave a very rudimentary argument today because just to introduce you to the physics of these diagrams.
Yes, thank you. Okay, that's the end of my questions.
Professor Alam,
Yes, please.
could you see the chat box? Actually, Dinesh Tarachandrani has written a question in the chat box.
Okay, let me see the chat box. So can you repeat this step again? So which step?
No, the second one.
Sir, I have two questions. You have an example of an electron and positron particles colliding at x1, then photon propagator is produced, and then again at x2. Both the particles are recreated, but if you point x2, another photon propagator also create. No, you see, instead of two photons. Now, first of all, photons and electrons, we have not yet developed a theory for them, because if I want to describe the Dirac field, and if I want to get photon, then I need to quantize the Maxwell field, which we have not done. I was just giving you the example example in the sense that to give the example of particle and antiparticle, I was saying electron and positron. That we'll do when we'll discuss the electromagnetic theory. Now, only thing which I am telling here is that see this series which you have, this S matrix, it has infinite number of terms. Right? Now I have picked up S2, where you see when you take the time order product and write it in terms of the normal order product and possible contraction, then once you contract two fields, then you get the propagator. So you have single propagator, one propagator, and then you have two particles in the incident channel and two particles in the final channel. So this particular term will not give nothing more than 2 particle going to 2 particle. So extra photon, as you are saying in the chat box, no extra photon can come because you have total, you have maximum number of 2 particles in the incident channel and maximum 2 in the final channel, right? So 2 going to 2. This is the process it will describe 2 going to 2 via the propagator. So though electron positron we have not discussed, let me be very clear. So electron and positron, they are just annihilating at a point x1, let us say, producing a photon, and that photon again creating a electron positron pair at x2. That will happen. So you cannot have those many numbers of particles. This is more clear when I discuss electromagnetism. Another, no. So what you are saying, it knows if there is another similar process interacts with the, no. See, anything similar process you cannot have. You see, all these what allowed process, Dinesh, will come from, let me just see where is that. All the allowed process are contained in this S. I don't know, maybe there is some communication gap. Probably there is some communication gap. You see, so suppose there are 2 fields here. So electron, positron. But it is not electron, positron. Please don't mistake me because this we are discussing scalar. So for example, electron, positron, and then a photon propagator and producing electron and positron. That's all. This particular term will not give you anything more. Now, if you take higher order term, if you want to describe higher order process, then you have to take the n equal to 3, n equal to 4 term. Dinesh, am I clear? So if you want some more, if you similar, so if you take S equal to n equal to 3, 4, then you will get higher order processes. But one interesting thing is that S contains all possible processes. But beyond first order is S equal to 2, n equal to 2, calculations become more. Calculations. That is not, because propagate nothing can propagate with the velocity more than the velocity of light, and especially here it is not. Let me see whose question is this. Oh, sorry, it is Ifat Nasreen. Okay, let me tell you that is not possible, Nasreen, because very simple reason. Because you see this scalar propagator corresponds to here this small pi field where the mass is m, non-zero. No the massive particle speed will always be less than the speed of light. Here there is a mass term m which is non-zero. So speed must be less than always, velocity of light in speed of light in vacuum.
Sir, I have a small question. Yeah. Hello.
Please. Yes, please. Yeah.
Sir, in the case of the propagator, I over p square minus m square, and there was a plus I epsilon. That is epsilon is being neglected here.
That's a very good question.
In which case we should retain it, another.
No, you can put it 0. The epsilon is always tends to 0, so you can put it 0. But it is a very important question in the sense that plus I epsilon, if you remember, was put there to shift the pole away from real axis.
Yeah.
Because you have the integration along the real axis, but in the integration path you don't want any singularity, any pole.
Right. Right.
So that is why that I epsilon is used to shift it
Oh.
either below or up the real axis.
Oh, there is no relation of the massive or non-massive massless particles in the dotted line exchange particle. There is no
Right.
relation like that.
So when we'll discuss the photon, the massless, when we'll
Yeah.
be discussing the photon, the massless particle,
Yeah.
so it will be minus I nu, denominator will be not p square minus m square plus I epsilon. It will be p square plus I epsilon.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. Thank you.
So is it understandable the Feynman diagram part today?
Yeah, sir. I could understand that the vertex actually, the dotted line and significant the dotted the exchange, the
no,
propagator, that is clear, sir. Today.
So it will be better, when we discuss known particles like electron and photon and all.
Yeah, yeah, that will be very easy to understand because if you take the popular example, then it will be better actually, sir.
Yeah.
Any question from the audience?
So, Dr. Badir, you may conclude here, I think. There is no one more
So
question.
if there is no questions, again, I would like to thank Professor Alam for providing us a lot of time from his busy schedules. Thank you, sir. So we'll meet tomorrow at the same time. Good night, everybody.
Acha, Dinesh Tharachandani, hello.
Yes, sir.
So he's asking for, okay, so please share. Okay. Tomorrow I'll give you this ADS safety. I forgot. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
So thank you, sir.
Thank
Good
you.
night, everybody.
Good night.